Hi, I'm Lindy Molesworth. I work as a geological and environmental consultant. By studying the geology and the geomorphology of the Menindee Lakes area, we're able to learn a lot about the evolution of the landscape. Around this area of the lakes there's no real bedrock exposed. It's buried under sediments, so it's more the sediments that we're looking at around here. We find that there's three main types of sedimentary deposits here. Those that are fluvial deposits, which were laid down by the river. There's lacustrine deposits, which were laid down by the lakes, and aeolian or windblown deposits. The windblown deposits which have moved the beach sands to form the lunettes on the eastern side of Lake Menindee accumulated fairly rapidly, and in doing so they buried fossil material and archaeological material. So they are often a rich source of fossil evidence to learn something about the previous environments. In particular here they've found evidence or fossils of megafauna, including the giant kangaroo and giant wombat. In old soil horizons, which are found in the lunettes and dune systems, they've been able to extract pollen, which also adds to our knowledge of the earlier paleo environments and enables us to identify the types of vegetation that were present at the time the sediments were accumulating. So the sediments and the fossils that they contain, as well as the cultural material, enable us all to build up a wonderful story of how the landscape evolved and how the climate changed over fairly recent geological time. Around this area we see mainly windblown sediments. These low sand ridges are called linear dunes, and they are orientated in the direction of the prevailing wind. So these ones run east-west largely, which indicates that the prevailing wind was a westerly wind. At the point where we're standing, we're looking at one of the linear dunes that has got an erosion gully through it, which enables us to see what the profile is through a dune or partly through a dune, and it shows the deep red colour. This will contrast with some of the different sorts of dunes, as in the sand lunette, which tends to be a whiter colour. Right. As you can see now, these dunes are now stabilised by vegetation, so they formed in a period that was much more arid than the one we presently are in. Within the dunes are paleosols, which are ancient soils, and they indicate periods when the climate was wetter and a thick vegetation had then built up on the dunes. And by looking at the pollen in these paleosols, we were able to tell the sorts of plants that grew at that period. The colour of the sediment tells us something about its history. Most of the sand in this area that we see out on the sand plains and the linear sand dunes is a deep red, which has an iron oxide coating. But when that sand has been reworked by water and waves, as it has, we see here on the edge of Lake Pamamaru, where it's built up a beach on the eastern side, the constant washing abrades away the iron oxide coating, so we end up with a much whiter sand here. So when we see different colours in the soil, in the profile of the sand dunes and things, we can tell a little bit about the history, whether it's been windblown or water-washed sand. The prevailing westerly wind causes waves which build up a beach of sand on the eastern side of the lakes during high water levels. And these sands, beach sands, are subsequently redistributed by the wind to form the crescent-shaped lunette or dune around the edge of the lake. When the lake dries out, the clay bottom of the lake is exposed, and the smaller pellets of clay are then blown as well, and they build up on the dune, but they have quite a different profile, so that we see sandy layers and clay layers that indicate then dry phases or wet phases of the lake. At this site, the Lake Menindee Lunette is eroding quite badly, but one of the benefits that have flown from the erosion is that it has exposed a number of interesting archaeological and early fossil sites in which various megafauna have been identified, such as the giant wombat and giant kangaroos. At this site we're located at the main weir, where the Darling River has been impounded to create an artificial lake which is called Lake Wetherell, behind which the water stays fairly permanently at an elevated level, which has caused permanent flooding, which has resulted in the loss of eucalypt stands, which would normally only have seasonal flooding. At this site we're looking at Cross Lake Pamamaru, and what we can see here is that the large area of eucalypts that have been flooded for too long, resulting in their death. While they need periodic flooding reinvigorates them, perpetual flooding is actually detrimental, and if the water level's held at a higher level for too long, they just die.